Hey, it's Greta, your host and certified PBT coach. PBT stands for Post-Betrayal Transformation, a complete rebuild of yourself and your life after betrayal. Whether you've been hurt in romance, friendship, business, or family, I offer coaching to help you release the emotional weight holding you back. You can book a session with me at copingwithghosting.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. And I can't wait to work with you. It's Greta. You may notice that my audio is a little bit off in this episode, and I apologize for that. This conversation is so incredibly valuable that I had to share it. So let's dive right in. Welcome to Coping with Ghosting, the podcast that provides hope, healing, and understanding for anyone who's been ghosted. I'm your host, Greta, and today's episode is about secure love in romantic relationships and ghosting. For all the new listeners, just to ensure that we're on the same page, the definition of ghosting that I use for this show comes from Oxford Languages and is the practice of ending a personal relationship with someone by suddenly and without explanation withdrawing from all communication. So this differs from leaving an abusive situation without a goodbye or disappearing after a boundary has been violated. My guest today, Julie Menanno, MA, LMFT, LCPC, is a therapist, author, and creator of The Secure Relationship, a community dedicated to helping people build secure, loving relationships. With over 1.3 million Instagram followers, Julie's relatable advice and real-time couples therapy sessions have made her a trusted voice in relational health. Her book, Secure Love, dives deep into attachment theory and is available worldwide. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the lovely introduction. I love your definition of ghosting, and I like how you include what it isn't. That's great.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Thank you. I'm so honored to have you here today. And I have a range of questions about secure love, addressing both single individuals and those currently in relationships. So if you could please just briefly share what attachment styles are and how they influence relationships and ghosting behaviors.
Yeah, so we have anxious attachment, which is someone who kind of has this undercurrent fear of abandonment, being either physically abandoned or emotionally abandoned, which is just as much of a fear, which is emotional abandonment is emotional invalidation, having your feelings minimized, being told you're irrational or you're too much or your appropriate emotional needs are, there's something wrong with them. And so this person is going to react to those underlying fears that they may not even be fully aware of, with a lot of distance closing behaviors. People with anxious attachment, they lean into the problem. They try to reestablish closeness or guarantee that they won't be abandoned by, kind of desperately seeking reassurance beyond the point of what is healthy. They typically have a poor relationship with their own feelings and their own self. You're going to find some shame in there. You're going to find some core beliefs that, am I really even lovable? Do I even really deserve love? Or is there just something sort of fundamentally broken about me that I need to hide? And then we have, in a lot of these behaviors, what happens is it does end up being too much for the other person. Their emotions aren't too much. For anybody, nobody's emotions are too much, but the way that they're acting out those emotions can be too much and end up pushing others away and creating this self-fulfilling prophecy. And then we have someone with an avoidant attachment, and their fears are more around failing, being seen as a failure, being seen themselves as a failure, Again, we have a lot of shame component. There's also a fear of being engulfed by relationships, like losing your sense of self. So they're not afraid of relationships. They're afraid of the loss of self that they have experienced relationships as being in their history, childhood. All of this is rooted most often in childhood. Someone with an avoidant attachment, the way they're going to respond to these fears that they carry, again, whether they have conscious awareness of them or not, is they're going to pull away. They're going to try to create distance. That's their safe place, is when they get all of this stuff triggered, which sometimes isn't until further into the relationship that it actually starts to be triggered. But their way is to pull away, create distance, overly self-regulate, deal with it on their own. No point in talking about their feelings. And so, of course, the way they respond to their own feelings ends up being the way they respond to the feelings of others, and which is not really responding at all. And so then obviously that creates a lot of, problems with intimacy, problems with closeness. Ghosting behaviors could come out of that as a way of, managing the wanting to leave the relationship with the fear of conflict and failure. So it's a kind of a way to balance that out. And of course, that leaves their partners feeling disconnected. And then their partners typically have an anxious attachment because these two, typically are in relationships together. And then the partner with the anxious attachment, of course, senses the distance. And then they go into their anxious behaviors, which then triggers the avoidance fears. And because now they're getting messages that they're being asked to do these emotional things they don't know how to do, leaving them feeling like a failure, or they're losing their sense of self. And so then they react by more distance. So it creates these cycles. And then we have the third category is disorganized attachment. And this is going to be someone who has kind of traits of both, but also some trauma. So you're just not going to get as much predictable behavior, lots of escalation, lots of, just higher emotions, bigger reactions, more fear, more mistrust of others. So these are the people that have, more of a tendency towards, sometimes violence, but not all people with disorganized attachment are violent, but just a lot of emotional dysregulation, kind of dramatic types of things that, you see in people who their responses to their fears are very big and everything feels very permanent. And then we have secure attachment, and someone with a secure attachment, they feel connected with themselves. They can access their emotions, but they're not overwhelmed by their emotions. They can help themselves emotionally as well as seek healthy connection from others. They know how to show up for others emotionally. They know how to seek partners who can show up for them and who can take in their support. They just tend to be, have fewer relationship fears. And because of that, they don't have to act out so much on the fears that aren't so much there, which doesn't create more relationship problems and more reason to have fear. So that becomes sort of like their relationships tend to take on positive cycles. But again, they know how to seek partners that are also securely attached at the same time. So yeah, that's the kind of, bird's eye view of it all. Of course, there's a lot of layers to what I just said and more nuance to it, but that's the big picture.
Got it. Yeah. And so I'm just trying to think of all my listeners, and many of them have been ghosted in dating, and they're currently single. So what steps would you recommend that they take to prepare themselves for a secure romantic relationship in the future?
Yeah, I think the first step, first of all, I think two people can be in a relationship and be insecurely attached and not be fully healed and work through it together, right? That is in fact, that's why I do what I do. It's very possible, it does require that both are interested in growing. But so I don't want to eliminate that as an option. But if you're really just, single and you want to set yourself up for success, you really need to do the self work first, right? And that is really figuring out, what's going to get in your way, what has gotten in your way in the past. Do you recognize, that sometimes you have a sense of fear of abandonment that causes you to cling too hard, right? And what is that about? What fears are you carrying around? What unresolved griefs are you carrying around? What parts of yourself need to be healed that you don't know how to show up for and help? And so by virtue of not knowing how to help these feelings or even access and put words to these feelings, you get in relationships and you start acting them out. And it's never anyone's fault that they get ghosted. Ghosting is 100% the responsibility of the other person. With that said, two things you can do to avoid ghosting is one, recognize what kind of partners aren't going to be likely to ghost to begin with before even getting involved. And two, working on your side of the street so you don't contribute to the relationship problems that could possibly, end up as a ghosting as an outcome. But with that said, you really don't want to be with someone who's going to deal with relationship problems with ghosting to begin with. So the first step is like when you can start showing up for yourself emotionally, you start to know what you're needing from someone else. So it's about two things. One, can I show up for my own emotions, regulate my own emotions, help my own emotions, listen to them, give them what they need without going into these panicky places? And can I seek a partner who is also able to help me with my emotions? Because we all need connection and support, and take in my support for their emotions. So it's really that self-work piece can't be ignored.
So we know that certain people are more likely to ghost. When people are dating, what can they look out for? Like, what are some signs that people might ghost?
A few different things. First of all, I think sometimes you just don't know because it does take a while to get to know someone. And by the time you get to know them and they've ghosted, that's, what am I trying to say? Like it can happen before you have even a chance to fully know them to begin with, to recognize the signs. But you want to, if someone is not very emotionally engaged, like they're not really ever talking about feelings or act as if they even have feelings, or they're not kind of curious about your inner world or feelings, like everything just feels very surface level, which isn't necessarily abnormal at the beginning of dating. But if gradually things aren't getting some sort of emotional energy that we're talking about going, that's a good sign that they don't know how to do emotions. And someone who doesn't know how to do emotions is going to act out on emotions. And ghosting might be one of the ways that they act out. Anyone who seems conflict avoidant, by virtue of being conflict avoidant, their ghosting is a way to avoid conflict, or at least the conflict of a conversation about breaking up or whatever. So yeah, I would just say, you're looking for signs that this person isn't emotionally healthy to begin with. And also, do they kind of come and go before they fully ghost, right? Will they like text for a bit and then they're gone for 2 days and then they come back? I mean, that's a sign that, they're reacting to something by distancing. And again, sometimes that can be normal in the beginning of a relationship for people to give it some space. And then any, history that they talk about of, lots of short-term relationships, that might be a sign that that's taken place. Mm-hmm. You probably know more about what to look for than I do, honestly.
I appreciate
your expertise.
Right. And I do have some shows about it, and I really like hearing your perspective on it because it's a different take, and it's a similar take, but it's always helpful for listeners to have a refresh on that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you. Glad to help.
Yeah. So, okay. Some of the listeners have been ghosted, and they'll do anything to reunite with the ghost.
Mhm.
Do you think it's possible to build a secure relationship with someone who's ghosted you? And if so, what would that even look like?
Yeah, it's always possible, for people to change and grow, and everybody is redeemable. Everybody has that opportunity, but they do have to, one, be able to own it, right? If we're not owning the ghosting, then how do we know what to work on? Two, they have to be willing to really do some self-exploration. Why was I needing to ghost? What feelings was I trying to manage by ghosting? What was I trying to avoid? What was the pain under there? Was I trying to avoid conflict? Was I trying to avoid anxiety? Why did I need to manage my feelings in that way instead of being clear, talking about it, really diving in and understanding what my feelings are to begin with? And then three, what was going on in the relationship that was uncomfortable for them, that they needed to ghost, to distance from it to begin with? And typically, there's something going on that probably both partners on some level are contributing to. Again, not that the ghoster is not responsible for the ghosting, but why are they managing all of this with just bailing, and escaping? And so we need to be able to commit to looking at what's the root cause of all of this, and let's work through and heal the root cause, so we don't have to go to that place where we're contributing to these negative cycles that don't feel good, whatever that looks like, and that we're dealing with them by ghosting, and maybe on the other person's side clinging, and then contributing in their own way. So we just need to be committed to trying to heal it. And then you have to have access to the right information to heal it. It's not always just as easy as saying, yeah, I want to work on this. We got to look around and search around for the right type of work to actually get there. And so, if you are, wanting desperately to get back into the relationship with the ghoster, you might really need to do some self-work around that to get to a place of discernment. Like, is there evidence that this person is willing to work on it? Or is it maybe going to be a situation where it seems like everything is okay and they say they're not going to do it again, but they're really not working on it? And will we end up down the same path? What is it about me that's wanting to get back into a relationship with someone who has shown signs of not being super healthy? So there's a lot of layers to it. It's not always a black or white answer. But if it is going to work out, there needs to be a really open, honest, clear conversation around, this is a problem. We can't do this anymore. It's kind of like if someone has an affair, right? Like, there absolutely is room for healing, but we got to be committed to the work. And we have to understand that some people aren't going to change. And at some point we can't keep giving chances.
Right. And in the past, I did take a ghost back, but what I did, they apologized on the surface. They said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That's not going to happen again."
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't receive at that time was, how can I make this better for you? What can I do? What do you need from me?
Right.
That must have been so hard for you to go through, like a deep sense of empathy. Like I saw a teeny bit of remorse, a little bit of an apology, but I wasn't getting the full on, I'm willing to change and I'm in because I care about you.
Yeah, that's a good sign that it's probably not going to work out.
It did not.
Yeah. It really do. And you just, to your point, they also need to show that they're willing to validate how painful it was for you. That's a big piece of it. If that's not happening, then that's kind of shows a lack of the ability to empathize or the ability to show empathy. And also, a part of not really taking ownership. We want to take ownership for the behavior, but we also have to take ownership for the impact of the behavior.
Mm-hmm. If a couple gets together after one person has ghosted, what type of couples therapy would you recommend?
Well, I always recommend one type of therapy, which is the type I do, which is emotionally focused therapy, because it's designed to get to the root of the issue. So I think, that's not to say that there's not useful aspects of other types of work, but I just feel so strongly about this how successful I feel with what I do and how successful I've seen other people be. And I'm doing couples work, but that's 50% of what I do. The other 50% of what I do is individual work with each partner. I'm just having them do it in the presence of each other instead of separately from each other. So the type of work I do is going to facilitate the exploration. What was going on with me? I need to get some words to those emotions that cause this behavior. I need to get empathy. I need to get validation. What happens is when the wounded partner, because ghosting is a wound, it's an attachment wound, right? And when the wounded partner is kind of sharing, and they need to share in a healthy way, right? They need to be like, hey, this is how I was affected. It was devastating. It was scary. And I still carry some fear, instead of you're bad. You're just a ghoster. That's not healthy, right? But then I need for the ghoster, a lot of times what happens is they'll shame spiral because they do feel bad about it, but it's, when you shame spiral, you're leaving the wounded partner's experience and going into your own. I have so much shame. Now my shame is taking center stage. And if that happens, a lot of times their response is going to be, well, just try to get them to feel better, right? Just apologize and move on, or just tell them it wasn't that big of a deal, or however that looks. It can look a number of different ways. So my work there would be, hey, let's talk about the shame instead of just losing yourself in it. And now I'm going to need for you to really just lean into your partner, even though it's hard, and really try to hear how they were impacted and really be able to say, I get it. I get how painful that was for you. And so that's a piece of the healing. They need to be able to talk about the wound in a healthy way outside of these cycles, which is kind of what I just said. And then again, we really have to be able to figure out what happened that led to this, what was going on in the relationship, that the symptom was ghosting, and what was going on with this person as an individual, that the symptom was ghosting is a symptom. It's a symptomatic behavior of something very, very deep.
Yeah, there is hope. And one day at a time, people can rebuild from the bottom up.
Yeah, I see people rebuild from a lot of stuff. A lot of painful stuff. And ghosting is on top of, it's, near the top of the list. It's a serious abandonment. It's a betrayal, especially if, the relationship has been going on for a length of time. I mean, it's hard enough anytime you're ghosted, but gosh, if you're, a year or more months or whatever into a relationship, I mean, and you've become attached, that's devastating. It's horrible.
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest things that we can go through in terms of relationships.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So if someone's new to a relationship after being ghosted, what can they do if they get triggered by something their new partner does or says? Like, let's say they get the silent treatment, or the partner stops texting for a few days. What can somebody do?
Well, first of all, they need to be able to, comfort themselves, right? And go into and feel some of the grief. Any experience of ghosting is a loss of trust, a loss of the person. It's layers of loss, maybe even a loss of some of your view of self, because a lot of people are going to make sense of the ghosting as what's wrong with me, that I'm ghostable, right? And so you got to grieve a lot of that. And make sure you're doing that grieving process, because if you're not doing the grieving process, that's going to make you even more sensitive to it. You're going to have more material under there to get tapped into. But then we have the reality that this person had this trauma. And now, no matter how much grieving we do in processing, they're still going to be sensitive to it. So we need to honor that. And, part of two people knowing each other and knowing about each other's triggers and being sensitive to each other is for the other partner to, for both partners to be able to have an open conversation and say, look, I just want to share with you, I had this experience. I am very sensitive to this. How can we work together here? I understand that it's not fair for you to have to, accommodate my fear at any given moment and give up, some of your sense of self because of this. You don't deserve to, be traumatized by my trauma also, right? But at the same time, part of love is reasonably accommodating each other. So it's kind of a working together, trying to find that balance kind of thing. And then there's this other piece of it that there's no way to know someone is not going to ghost you without repeated experiences of not being ghosted. So sometimes you just have to step back and go, yeah, this hurts. I had this terrible experience. I'm doing everything I can to kind of make sure that this doesn't happen again. But part of trusting that it's not going to happen is having it not happen. And getting through that and recognizing too, like not everybody out there is a ghoster.
Yeah, that's totally true. And in the past, when I was in a new relationship and all of a sudden they didn't text me after even a few days after we had gone on a few dates, and I felt like, they had made plans with me, whatever.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to say, okay, Greta, okay, little Greta, you're going to be okay no matter what happens.
Yes.
Like, it's going to be fine. Breathe and feel your feelings.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's also, and I don't know if, how appropriate this was for your situation, but there's also the expectation that, look, we've been on a few dates. Like I need to hear from you. If this is going to go forward, like, for me to feel safe and close in a relationship, like I do need to hear from you before a few days go by. To me, that's an appropriate ask, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's completely reasonable to state your needs. So I want to move over to conflict because you write a lot about that in this amazing book. So sometimes people are ghosted after a challenging conversation, a misunderstanding, an argument. So when when there's conflict in another relationship, it can be incredibly scary. Like they think, oh, well, okay, now I'm going to get ghosted again because something hard just came up. So what are some of the best practices for handling conflict and repair?
Yeah. So number one is, avoiding negative cycles, right? So conflict can go one of two ways. Either we can have painful feelings come up, which is going to happen in conflict, and we can act out on that in ways that are not emotionally safe for anybody, where instead of communicating in a healthy way, we're blaming each other, criticizing each other, stonewalling each other, shutting down, getting defensive, all these things that are invalidating each other that are only going to cause even more triggers. And then both partners go into these protective places where no nervous systems are not open in this place. So the only thing that's really being talked about when couples go into a negative cycle is, how come you're not meeting my attachment needs for emotional safety right now? Right? Meet my needs. They're both in an attachment need place. And at the same time, they're fighting for that. And so not only on top of that, they're fighting for it in a way that keeps on meeting the needs. Okay. And so it just goes back and forth in a pattern for a few rounds. And then they end up mad at each other or whatever. And that's when the ghosting might take place, is in this after place. And so on top of the fact that they just harmed each other's attachment bond, they don't get through the topic anyway. They don't, whatever they were talking about originally, money, where to eat, go on vacation, should we go on vacation or whatever, like that doesn't even get resolved because they get into this relationship friction. And so the idea is that instead of doing that, we just use these basic principles of emotionally safe conversation that serves the purpose of meeting attachment needs, meaning that we're speaking to each other in a way that we both feel heard, we both feel understood, we both know our needs matter, we both can emotionally validate and understand where each other are coming from, we're being curious. It doesn't mean we have to agree with each other, but we're being just, basically sending messages that you matter to me. Right? Your feelings matter to me. And in that case, their nervous systems are going to stay open, and they're much more likely to not only get through the conversation and actually maybe either resolve something or make some headway on resolving something. And they're going to feel probably emotionally closer, because it does help you feel emotionally closer when you have the opportunity to really hear and understand each other, right? So that's a positive cycle. So if we, what happens in a relationship is two people come together and it's great, right? They have all these compatibilities. They're physically attracted to each other and everything's just wonderful. And then bam, the first conflict comes along. And if they don't have a secure attachment with self, then the odds are high that they're going to act out in the conflict in ways that go into these negative cycles. Okay, so remember, the anxious partner has a core fear of abandonment, and the avoidant partner has a core fear of failure. So now everything's been going on because the anxious partner hasn't experienced abandonment, and the avoidant partner hasn't experienced failure. The conflict comes along, and now the avoidant partner is getting these messages, you're getting it wrong. And so they go into a fear of failure and they don't feel good. They act out in ways that then tell the anxious partner, now you're being emotionally abandoned. And then the anxious partner goes into their place. So we need to not do that, right? We need to not go to that place. We need for everybody to feel safe and successful. And then obviously, the fewer negative cycles you have, the healthier the relationship is going to be, and the less likely it is that someone's going to ghost. But with that said, if the person is likely to ghost because of conflict, it's all kind of working together. Like the very thing that heals you from having these negative cycles means that you're not going to manage conflict by ghosting to begin with. Does that make sense?
Could you
The skills that you need to learn and the work that you need to do to manage conflict in a healthy way is the same work that you need to do to not be a ghoster, right? So if you can just learn to do conflict well, the ghosting takes care of itself, right? It's one and the same. And so then, the reality is also that every couple is going to have a negative cycle from time to time. It's just a normal part of being human. Sometimes our capacity, the conflict exceeds our capacity to stay healthy. And in that, for whatever reason, we're still growing, or it's a new topic, or you're hungry and tired or whatever. And so in that case, now we need to go to step 2, which is make full repairs. And again, healthy couples know how to do this because they can talk about what happened with emotional safety. They can take ownership. They can validate each other's pain and, talk about solutions going forward. And so then when you can do that, you have a healthy relationship. And so it's almost like how you do conflict is going to make or break the relationship. As long as you have basic compatibility and basic value systems and all the other kind of foundational stuff on board. Beyond that, it's how do you do conflict? And if you know how to do conflict well, ghosting won't happen.
I love that. On your Instagram, you wrote a really big, awesome power move statement for an argument. And I'm just going to read it, okay? So It says, say this: you aren't my enemy. You're on my team. We're a team. How can we communicate that to each other, even as we disagree about this topic?
Yeah, that's it. That's the positive cycle.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah, so, when couples can come together and recognize like we're really not enemies of each other, the negative cycle we get stuck in is the actual enemy. It really can reframe.
Mm-hmm. What are some other things people could say to de-escalate a conflict?
Okay. So, one thing is, let's say, a partner example where you didn't get the text for days or whatever, Yeah. Okay. So instead of coming in and either suppressing it and not saying anything at all, and then waiting to kind of act out or blow up later, or carrying all this anxiety around, or coming in hot and being like, I can't believe you haven't called me in 2 days. How could you do that? You know about my wounds. And there's truth to that, right? But that delivery is probably not going to go well, or be passive aggressive. I don't need you. I'm going to now ghost you back, or give them the silent treatment. Like, the healthier option is, hey, let's talk about this, right? I know you've got some good reasons, whatever they are, for having some space, or, you've got stuff going on in your life. At the same time, for me to feel safe and close, we're at this point in the relationship where I do need to know that we're going to have some more regular communication, and that's important to me. And you're not just putting that out there, but to be able to put that out there, you have to believe you deserve to put it out there, right? You have to really be like, I deserve this. I'm not being too much. This is an appropriate request. And you're going to see how that person reacts to that. If that person is like, whoa, that's too much for me, or is like, wait, what are you talking about? I was just busy, or gets defensive or whatever, or acts like you're, out of line or whatever. That's good information that this person isn't really going to be able to show up for you emotionally. So the response from them that would feel good and healthy is, all right, tell me more. Okay. I can work with you on that. It doesn't mean that you're going to come up with some plan some rigid plan where you have to text every 18 hours, or, it's just like flexibly meeting each other. So that's one healthy way. And the elements of those two deliveries are, starting out. I know you've got stuff going on. That's validating, right? You're validating them before you go into your concern. Like, you're not just launching in with, here's what you're getting wrong. And then you're not criticizing, you're not blaming, you're just sharing about your own needs, right? I think I would add to that, what's going on with you? Sometimes I get kind of worried. I really like you. I like where this relationship is going. And if I don't hear from you, then I kind of go to a little bit of a worried place. And I also have this history. So you're really sharing about your own vulnerable feelings and sharing for himself. And then just being assertive about what you're needing and why. It's not anything more than, this is what helps me feel safe and close in a relationship. Like, my goal here isn't to control you and make you something you're not. My goal is to have a healthy relationship with another human, and I deserve that. And then the response from the other person, same elements. They're validating, they're being curious and willing to kind of like work together. And what happens is just having that conversation in that way builds safety and makes the other person want to pull in. You're sending messages of safety. I'm not going to attack you. I'm not going to try to control you. I'm not going to put you on a guilt trip. I'm not going to be passive aggressive. And then their response leaves you feeling safe, which helps you tolerate moments when they might not be as responsive as someone's anxious attachment might like them to be. And I can give you more examples if you'd like.
I would love more examples.
Okay.
That's great advice. Keep on going.
Yeah. So, the whole, chapter 13 of the book is just example after example. It's like, if you need more help around the house, if your partner doesn't want to go to therapy, if, what are some ways that you can deliver these messages? And I don't just put the scripts in. I also put why these scripts are useful, right? What it's not criticism. It's not blame. It's not defensiveness. And what is it? Well, it's first validating. It's sharing vulnerably. It's healthy assertion instead of reactive anger. It's leading with curiosity, trying to understand the other person, not just kind of bulldozing. So let's say, your partner, you've been in a relationship for a while and there's starting to be some friction and your partner's like, no, I don't want to go to therapy, right? So a lot of people are going to respond to that with, I can't believe it. You don't want to work on the relationship. I'm the only one who wants to put the work in. And, that's not fair. And again, there's truth to all that. That's a frustrating place to be when someone doesn't want to put the work in and you're over here going, but I love you and I like you, but we have these things and I want to work on it so we can feel closer, And so a way to kind of respond to that is first get to know what the resistance is about to begin with. Like, I promise you, they have a good reason for not wanting to go to therapy. The outcome of that good reason might not be so healthy, and we might not agree with that. But what's going on with them? Well, maybe they've seen multiple people in their life go to therapy and end up in divorce or splitting up. And so for them, it's like therapy is like the last straw, and then it actually might make things worse. Maybe they're afraid that, they're going to get ganged up on, right? Nobody wants to get ganged up on. Maybe they're afraid, trying to think of another common fear. I can't think of it. There's like 3 or 4 common fears, but let's just work with those 2. So you really want to help this person put words to what their fear is. What is so scary for you about therapy? I hear you. I know this is like a hard topic. And then when they share that, you say, you know what? I get it. If I thought therapy was going to ruin our relationship, I wouldn't want to go either. Right. And I appreciate that this is your way of trying to protect the relationship. That means something to me. And kind of lead with that. And that's curiosity. That's validation. That's trying to understand where they're coming from, even though you don't agree that's not going as the solution. And then it would be the time to, share, here's what's going on with me, right? What's going on with me is that, I want to protect the relationship too. I want us to feel safe and close. And I think there might be some value in learning to go and speak to each other in healthier new ways. And, would you be open to giving it a shot? Let's say we go to 3 sessions, and if, we're not seeing a tiny bit of improvement, then maybe we, reevaluate. And if you have really taken the space to listen to them and understood where they're coming from instead of just attacking their perspective, there's a much better chance that they're going to be open to what you're saying too.
Right. Listening is such a critical part of a healthy relationship.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And recently on Instagram, you spoke about loving listening and how it can really help couples. And I'd love for you to share about loving listening with my loving listeners.
Yeah. So loving listening isn't just listening. Like we all kind of, conceptually know listening is a good thing, right? Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody's kind of going through the world wanting to be heard and validated, right? And so, and understood. That's a big one too. And so we all kind of know it, but sometimes it can feel mechanical, right? It's like, I'm listening because I have to listen, because that's a good thing to do. It's just a good thing to do to listen. So we're just kind of biding the time, and waiting for our turn, maybe sometimes. But I like to think of it as like heart listening. Like, this is a gift I'm giving to my partner. Like, we all like to give gifts, right? It feels good to give gifts. I just gave my husband some new luggage for his birthday. And he grew up, they were kind of financially struggling. So he's never had good luggage in his whole life. And it's like the greatest thing in the world for me. And he liked it too. And so listening is an even better gift than that. It really is. I mean, who doesn't like feeling heard and understood? And so sometimes if we just reframe it into, I'm doing this as an act of love, I'm doing this as a gift, it can be much easier to really engage, fully be engaged in the listening process.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I think you're welcome.
Yeah. So I have a question. Actually, it's from my friend. I told her you were coming on, and she's really jaded in love. Like, she's been dating and dating. It hasn't gotten her anywhere. She's kind of bitter now.
No.
She says, and she's been ghosted a ton. So she asks, how have the chances of having a happy, healthy, secure relationship changed post-COVID-19 with the societal changes in the way people communicate, more online interactions, and perceived unlimited options due to swipe culture?
Yeah, I think it's gotten exponentially harder. First of all, you take people who pre-COVID were already growing up in homes where, kind of the average home, there's always exceptions, but is the most emotionally supportive environment. Our parents don't really know how to do that language. We've kind of lost the art of it. I think technology has played a part in that, and lots of different reasons. But so we're not getting a whole lot of emotional health in the homes that we're growing up in. And then on top of that, what we are getting rewarded for is more surface level stuff. Like most people, can say, look, yeah, I grew up in a home where, my worth was largely defined by what I did, how I performed, how I'm performing now. Everything, in my parents kind of raised me to do well in the surface areas of life, but we kind of maybe miss some of that emotional validation piece. So if you don't know how to do that, then you don't really know how to actively emotionally connect. So how on earth can you go out and emotionally connect with other people? And so then what we fall back on is paying closer attention to the surface things, which is all you see on the screen, right? And so it takes away the opportunity to, just even meet someone at a bar and have a 20-minute conversation with them. And maybe they're not someone you would give 2 seconds to on the screen, but in real life, they end up being great, right? And so you're just kind of eliminating a lot of options right there, because you cannot possibly know a lot about a person by looking at them on the screen. So that's really difficult. So I think it's, what I'm kind of trying to say in my roundabout way is we have a culture in a society of people who are just less emotionally healthy to begin with. And now we've thrown in more technology than we know what to do with that is now blocking emotional connection even more. And yeah, it's hard. I mean, I just am so happy I'm not out in that world right now. I mean, it's hard. I would like to think that some of the information that you can access on social media now for free, that's high quality about relationships, maybe that offsets some of it. It gives you a better idea of know what to look for. I think at the very least, maybe it offsets it, but it's still hard. So I would like to see maybe some dating sites where the theme is true connection, like emotional connection, or I don't know, like just attachment security related, something where we're all going into this with a common ground here. We're not just going in to look at people's pictures. We're like actually going into this to find deeper connections. And I don't know, maybe screen for people, like give them personality tests or emotional health tests. That would be a good idea, right? Quizzes, how emotionally healthy are you? You have to score a certain number to be able to be on this dating site.
That would be incredible. I would love that.
It? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how ethically that would play out, but
a fun attachment theory app.
Seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been incredible. I am so grateful that you came on the show and shared your wisdom with the listeners. I know they are wanting your book. I know they want to connect with you. How can they do that?
Well, so the securerelationship.com is my website. And, there's a link to the book. Again, it's multiple languages all over the world. You can get it pretty much anywhere books are sold. And then also I have courses, I'm putting together right now a course for healing anxious attachment with self. So the self work, it's pretty good. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be like 2 hours long. So you'd need, people kind of need to do it in bites, a lot of deep emotional work with that. A lot of the deep work that I do in my practice, with the couples I work with. And I've got a Wednesday night group of people that we get together every other Wednesday. That's really great. And I'm trying to just like have such a variety of resources at different price points. Everything on Instagram I provide for free. And then I've got groups and then I've got, my work and then my therapists who work for me. So I'm really trying to do everything I can to help as many people as possible get emotional health, emotionally healthy and find secure attachment. So that would be the securerelationship.com. And then my Instagram is at the secure relationship. And then my podcast is the Secure Love Podcast, which for me, to me, this feels like the greatest thing of all, because it's actually bringing the work to life with a real couple. And, underneath the surface, maybe Drew in season 1, it's Drew and Melissa, right? Maybe, Drew didn't ghost her as far as abandoning her physically, but every day was little emotional ghosts, right? And that's just as painful for people. I mean, maybe not just as painful, but very painful. And then, on her side of the coin, she has an anxious attachment. So she's contributing to these 1,000 paper cuts too. So you can kind of look at the dynamics underneath the surface, whether it's ghosting or just negative cycles. And you're going to see a lot of the same vulnerable emotions and shame that are fueling all of this stuff.
It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're so welcome. It was great. Great questions.
And listeners, please follow Coping with Ghosting on social media. Join my free and private Coping with Ghosting Facebook support group and leave a rating for this podcast so other people can find it. You could also subscribe to this on YouTube. And remember, when you're ghosted, you have more time to connect with yourself and people who have stellar communication skills. You deserve the best.
You're just a ghost to me.
Hey, I'm so excited to tell you about Coping with Ghosting 101. This is my signature program that's going to help you heal, shift your mindset, and find clarity fast. It's under an hour, and you'll learn the healing essentials that you need after being ghosted, from powerful strategies to reframe your experience to ways to help you build your confidence. Plus, I've included a special bonus. There's guided relaxation exercises that will help you feel calm and grounded. This video workshop provides the support and clarity you need to move forward anytime and anywhere. Download Coping with Ghosting 101 today at copingwithghosting.com or click the link in the show notes. Go directly there and start feeling better now.